Okay, so we're back to do a couple more NBA previews. This will be the last ones we're doing before the season kicks off next week. Going to go over Portland from the West and Atlanta from the East. Now, to do that, joined by Darcy Emery for a second time, as well as Pat Emery, huge Blazers fan. So, guys, welcome. We'll get things started with some preseason. Now, I'll throw this to you first, Darcy. Is Luka looking a little bit thick?
I actually think he's looking thinner than he was last year, but that's just his body type. That's his body type, you know. He makes it work. So whatever he does is working, so I'll let him keep doing it.
Yeah, look,
His play hasn't suffered.
His play hasn't suffered. No, exactly. Look, I did see a bit of a meme going through on the internet, especially the Harden warm-up shot. And then that was put next to Doncic, and the everything's bigger in Texas was sort of the caption for that. So just interesting. Yeah, no, he's definitely got that body shape. He's certainly not going to be a guy that's ever going to be ripped. But yeah, definitely doesn't affect his play like Pat said. Now, Pat, quick Blazers preseason question. If Portland played Sacramento every game, would Harry Giles be the best big in the league?
Probably. Everyone eats against Sacramento when they play against them after being on their team. Like, it seems like guys who leave Sacramento immediately get better, and when they go to Sacramento, they immediately get worse. Like, it's not a massive surprise to me. I've been on Giles for a while now, man. Like, I quite like him. Not sure where he's going to fit into our rotation, but he probably would be the best big man in the league if we played Sacramento every night. You're right.
Yeah, look, his couple preseason games were pretty awesome. He was just basically feasting. He was protecting the rim. He was hustling for every offensive rebound. He was certainly a motivated man, that's for sure. But now, sort of on to the more important stuff that we're here, the nitty gritty. So Portland had a busy offseason, Pat. Is there a move that stood out to you in particular as one that you sort of really liked?
Well, yeah, getting Robert Covington was absolutely massive. Maybe the casual NBA fan wouldn't know him, but they really should. He's the ultimate 3-and-D guy. We got him from Houston. He was almost playing, I don't know, the power forward / center in that small ball lineup, but he fits perfectly in Portland because, I mean, most people know our backcourt can do everything offensively, but maybe struggle a bit defensively. So getting that guy who can defend but also space the floor was absolutely massive. And like on top of that, a similar type of guy in Derek Jones Jr. What's his name? Airplane mode, flight mode. I forget what it is now.
Yeah, I think it's airplane mode.
Airplane mode. If he can hit threes, then like he could start at the three. Like I really like that pickup. Bit of an underrated pickup. And then getting like Rodney Hood back from injury, that kind of wing depth is where I think our biggest advantage has been in this offseason. We've always lacked wing depth, and now it seems like we've got a lot of it to go along with that nice backcourt of ours.
Yeah, well, I know Covington in particular sort of spoke about it in the Mavericks pod I did with Darcy, but coming from obviously Philly and going on to Houston, you can sort of see just the impact he has as that sort of floor spacer. And then on defense, he's certainly not a guy that's going to, be able to lock down his opposing man. You can't throw him on a guy like Tatum. We tried to do that with Philly and we just got absolutely cooked. His best asset, Pat, is help defense. He's an elite help defender. He can come across and protect the rim. He was sort of having to do it all with those Houston sort of small ball lineups in particular. And he may have turned the corner, but I can't see it.
Don't you reckon it's a bit unfair to compare that Houston thing when they had zero rim protection? Like asking him to be the rim protector and hold you down on the boards, like that's not what he's good for. He's good to like kind of gamble a bit on defense, and yeah, maybe he can't guard LeBron or Tatum, but like who really can? So if he can guard them a little bit and hit threes, then like our advantage is going to be in the backcourt. If he can almost just be below those guys, I think that's where we're at.
Okay, interesting. No, because I
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you, but I just disagree. With Philly, we tried, and it didn't seem to work in terms of putting him on ball on certain guys. Yes, Tatum and LeBron are extreme examples because no one can slow him down. But then on the opposite, you sort of got to see how he would be with that Houston team. And yes, I get that they're quite an anomaly. No other team is really looking to go that insanely small this season. But no, it'll definitely be interesting to see how he fits. Das, what do you think about Portland's offseason? Any move that sticks out for you?
I think the Rocco pick was a great fit for their lineup, which I think they needed to duel out what was going to be their best lineup. In terms of moves, I think bringing in Cantor was a pretty good move. Like when it comes down to it, he's a guy who you can bring in the playoffs that can actually put the ball in the hole. I can imagine him against a team like LA or Denver and him actually having the ability to score against those teams in even a limited minutes impact. Other moves for Portland, I think, the Rocco move is probably number one, and I think probably bringing Cantor off the bench was their second best move. But I personally think the biggest thing to look out for in their team is the improvement or just even the presence of Zach Collins in the lineup. Like, he wasn't there at all last year. Got injured like off the bat first week, and he was expected to be a huge part, like a starter, a guy who could hopefully score the ball close to 10 points a game is what I think they're assuming from him. He's a guy who's been shooting 38% from three. So if he can be a guy who can come on and start shooting and actually stay on the floor without fouling, I think he's a big part of what they got to go on this offseason.
Yeah. Pat, how do you feel about Zach Collins?
I really like what he could be, but like, to be honest, he hasn't been anything yet. And like, yeah, he can shoot threes, but his main thing is he cannot stay out of foul trouble. Like, he literally gets on the court and fouls immediately. And like, at his best, he's going to have to guard like, I guess, the best forwards in the league. And like, he can't stay out of foul trouble. So until he can do that, I think adding a guy like Kovo like helps in that sense though, and DJJ, because it takes the pressure off him a bit. Like, previously it was Melo. Like, you got to have so much defensive presence to cover up Melo, like, to be honest. And like, even before that, like, it's the most wing depth we've had in years, in my opinion. So that naturally helps Zach Collins, I guess, is what I'm saying. I'm not here or there about him. Fingers crossed. Crossed.
Yeah, look, I think probably a position that you guys didn't really look to fill is that sort of backup guard spot in terms of who's going to take care of the ball handling duties. But I know you did have a guy like Shabazz Napier in the past. You're probably going to put a little bit of faith in Ant Simons if he can take another step and be on the court there a little bit. Otherwise, I do know that after that first, is it roughly 6-7 minutes, that it's normally CJ that goes to the bench and then he comes on with
Gary Trent Jr. is going to, I think, take a lot of ball handling. He's ready to make another jump. He was huge in the playoffs. I think he could be a little sneaky guy to watch out for, to be honest. Gary Trent Jr. He can hoop. In my opinion, I don't know. Do you like Gary Trent Jr. though?
He can definitely shoot, and I think he's got a little bit of playmaking. Like, he's not a point guard necessarily, but the guy can score and he can create offense when he's on the floor. So I think I expect a little bit of a jump from him too. He's only a young guy. Yeah,
and CJ, like, he playmakes pretty well. Like, he is a combo guard. He can play the one. So I don't see it as big an issue. I do like Anthony Simons, but like, with those three, there's not much minutes for him, to be honest. Dame's going to play the whole game.
Cantor will eat up some minutes.
Yeah. We'll play bigger, I guess, a bit. So Hood as well. We haven't spoke about Hood, but he's going to eat up some minutes at the 2-3. So we're pretty deep this year, it seems.
The basis that I had for Hood is he was very efficient last year. The year before before obviously doing his Achilles, I think he only averaged 11 points and he was starting for you guys, but it was on 50% shooting. He was shooting close to high 40s in 3-point range as well. So again, I'm on board with you. Very fascinated to see how he integrates back into that Portland rotation with the bench guy. Is it too much to have potentially Melo, Gary Trent and him on the court at the same time, or is that not an issue in your mind?
That could definitely be a squad at times. I mean, Melo's defense is always going to be a bit like of a question, but like, that team, that's a fine lineup for me. Like, people forget before his injury, Hood was like probably maybe our third or fourth best player in that Denver series that got us to the Western Conference Finals the year before last. Like, before he hurt his leg, he was, like you said, he was playing really efficient. If he can get back there, like, it's going to help us massively. Him and Gary Trent could back up, like, guards. Like, I'm fine with that. I think that's a really good backup guard pairing. Maybe Simon's a bit as well. Like, why not?
Yeah. No, there's a lot to take from that Portland off season, and we could go on for a bit longer, but we'll move on to season predictions because it's just around the corner. And Pat, can you give me how many think wins? What seeding do you think your boys will end up with, and how far do you think you guys can go in the postseason?
Like, it's got to be championship aspirations. Like, it's okay. I'd be a fool to say it's not possible. Like, I think it's possible for Portland to win a championship this year. I really do. If I was betting my life on it, I'm a Portland fan, but I would not bet my life on them winning it. I think anything outside the top four in terms of standings is probably a bit of a failure. Like, I think we're top four ready. Like, I think the two LA teams are going to have a lot of wins. I think Denver racks up a lot of wins, but like after that, I feel like we're right there. Like we should be aiming for home court advantage in the first round this year. The amount of wins, I mean, I don't know what gets you to 4th seed in the West. You got to get a lot of wins, like nearly 60, like maybe 55, 53. Like I'd hope to get at least 50, like at least 50 wins. Like if you don't get 50 wins, you're not going to be in the top 4 probably in the West. So I don't know.
With 10 games less, you still think 50s with 72 game season?
Oh, sorry, you're right. 72-game season. You're right.
It's probably high 40s. It's probably mid to high 40s.
High 40s.
Yeah. High 40s.
Mid to high 40s.
Exactly. Yeah.
It doesn't really matter to me what the wins is. You just got to be top 4. If we're not top 4, then like we're not gonna like that's a failure unless we have injuries. But if we're not top 4, that's a failure for me. With the off-season moves, like why not? This is Dame's. This is his year. This is Dame's year.
Yeah, no, I'm big fan of Dame. I have huge expectations for him this year. I loved obviously what he did in the bubble, but you can go back to what he was doing in just before the All-Star break, where he ruined the Kobe night for the Lakers effectively, where he went berserk. If you even go back to that game,
special that little run he had where he was just dropping 50
on a nightly basis
every other game, like
yeah.
Just 50-piece nuggets every other game. Like, it was ridiculous. It was honestly ridiculous.
Yeah, that run was absurd.
This is the best support he's ever had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Das, how do you feel about the Blazers this year? If we just take away the wins, as Pat sort of said, and just focus on seeding and the playoffs, where do you think Portland for this year?
Higher seed than Dallas.
I think they're pretty much – I think they're neck and neck. I think I was going to say the wins, I reckon, about – 43, 44. I think the Mavs and them will literally be probably a game apart. I even reckon the head-to-head matchups between the Mavs and the Blazers are probably 2 of the more important games the whole season in terms of seeding. I think, as Pat said, I expect them to probably be a home playoff team. And I also expect the Mavs to be there. So for me, there's the Lakers in that top tier in the West. And then I think there's 4 teams, maybe 5, who are in that second tier who I expect to be, well above 500. And I expect them to be a threat to come second. I think if you can go as deep as Dallas and Portland, who are a threat to come second, along with the Clippers and Denver. And then I think Utah may be just behind that. But, Portland, I expect them to win a lot of games. They win a lot of games whenever Dame and CJ play, and Nurk. If all those 3 guys are playing, they win a lot of games. And now they're adding quite a bit of depth. When there's depth on the wing to go along with that lineup.
Yeah, well, for me, I've sort of been very similar to Pat. I think 4th seed, and I think you've got to be looking at a Western Conference Finals sort of minimum, just based off all the moves you've sort of made. That will sort of take us into this year, now that you guys have reloaded. Outside of Lillard, Pat, who do you think will be the Blazers' best player?
Well, I mean,
most important best.
CJ. Yeah. I'm a huge CJ guy. I don't think he gets enough love, so I have to say CJ. Like, he is so good. But Nurk is our most important player. Like, anytime Nurk's out, we struggle to get wins. Like, his defensive presence, his rim protection around those 2 guards, and the fact that he can really pass with those guards, he shares our offense where we play him in the high post a bit, handoffs, backdoors, everything like that. None of our other bigs offer that like he does. And his scoring in the back end of last season, like his bubble stats were just massive. Like his defensive numbers and his efficiency, like he's our key in my opinion. Like we spoke about the wing guys. Yes, they as key, but Nurk's the guy for me. If Nurk can be an all-star and CJ and Dame are what they normally are, then we should be top 4. Like, why not? Like, he's the guy for me. Yeah. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I agree.
Das?
I agree. I think for sure that Nurkic should be aiming for all-star level. He should, or at least all-star production. Like, when you look at how well he performed in the bubble and you think about, can he take his game to another level scoring the ball? We know that he can dish out at least 5 assists a game. He can play make, which is huge for them. But if he can establish himself as a scorer, a guy who can get 15 to 20 points in playoff series against the likes of Jokic, Porzingis, against Anthony Davis and Montrezl Harrell. If he can score and even score 20 against those guys, that's the kind of production, the all-star production that Portland need to ascend them into a real threat to win the championship.
I'm sort of on board with both of you there. I think it's crazy to think at one stage that Denver had both him and Jokic.
Crazy.
It was, who's to think that, Nurkic may not be the player that he is now if he's still on Denver and playing the sort of backup role to Jokic. But
He
it's
was
insane.
starting ahead of Jokic for a bit as well, which is crazy. They started him ahead of Jokic, like crazy.
Yeah,
so
they obviously did that Plumlee deal for Nurkic straight swap that at the time no one was really too worried about on either side. There was no real winner and loser. It seemed to be a pretty straight swap in terms of the ability of both those guys. And now you sort of look however long down the road it's been, 4 or 5 years, maybe a bit less, that, Portland are the clear winners from that one because now Mason Plumlee is the Pistons starting center.
Maybe.
And that's even a stretch.
That trade doesn't get talked about enough. That was highway robbery when you think about it.
Yeah, look, if I'm just looking at Nurkic's bubble stats, it was 17.5 with 10 rebounds, 4 assists, steal and a half, nearly 2 blocks. So he was doing it all stats-wise, but his impact for that roster, as you say, Pat, goes beyond the stats. But for people that just look at the numbers, the productivity's there. And, coming off, obviously, the long layoff with the broken leg, he sort of fit back in quite seamlessly. And you can definitely say that, of course, Lillard's play in the bubble was absurd and he was the deserved MVP. But, yeah, I don't think Nurkic gets enough recognition for the impact he had in the seeding games, where, as you say, every game was a must-win in the bubble for Portland. There was no games off there.
He was carrying us on the glass, and it should also be noted that losing Whiteside is always an addition to any basketball club. So I think that will definitely get us a few more wins just naturally. So
yeah,
top four.
Yeah. Whiteside, talk about a good stats, bad team guy. That's he's the poster child for that. So that sort of covers up.
He's in the right spot for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Sacramento, perfect.
Yeah, Sacramento can deal with that. So
I actually like Holmes, which is annoying. Anyway.
No, Holmes. Well, Holmes, he was drafted by Philly, so he was a gem in the second round. That one of Hinkey's guys that he was able to nab from Bowling Green that no one had heard of. I remember them announcing the pick to the day, and I swear whoever was doing the draft for ESPN almost didn't know his name, as if he was sort of, one of these random European guys. It was on that sort of level. So yeah, no, it's crazy to think how impactful Holmes has been, because he was very important for Sacramento's run. They were very hot, Sacramento, before the stoppage actually occurred. I think they also made a switch with Buddy Hield to the bench, Bogdanovic to the starting lineup. Holmes came back from being out, and they went on a bit of a run themselves. So we'll head over to Atlanta now that we've covered off on Portland, and they, just as much as Portland, if not more than any sort of team in the league, had a very, very busy offseason with transactions. Darcy, is there a move that stood out to you as one you liked? Is there one you hated? Is there a player of interest already on that Atlanta Hawks roster that you want to speak about?
Oh, definitely. It's Danilo Gallinari for sure. He's an underrated veteran, and I think there's a reason that a lot of teams have been looking for him. He's a guy who's been there, done that, physically and journeyman, but also he's actually coming into his third season in a row when it's been almost his best statistical year. He's averaging close to 20 points a game. He's shooting in the high 30s from three. He gets to the free throw line often, makes threes, shoots 90% of the free throw line. He's the kind of guy that can get you 20 every night with no problem, really. And I think any team who's trying to make the playoffs in the East could use someone like that desperately. Even if the other parts of the Atlanta team and the way that they're trying to fit it don't work out, you can pretty much pencil in that Gallinari is going to give them production.
Yeah, no, I've got Gallinari here as well, but I've got him for actually a different reason. But we'll go to you, Pat, and then we'll come back to my Gallinari reason. Pat, how do you feel about Atlanta's offseason?
I like it. I'm probably not as high on them as a lot of other people, but I do really like Bogdan. I think he's an excellent pickup for them. I really liked him at Sacramento, but the him and Buddy thing, they didn't figure that out for some unknown reason. They couldn't start them together. I'm not sure why. But at the same time, I really like Huerta, and they're kind of the same player. And with the Gallo thing, like I do like Gallo, but I just like John Collins is their key for me. So I'm not exactly Darcy seems to think Gallo could start at the 3. I'm not sure about that. I see him as a backup, maybe 4 who like could finish the games with Collins at the 5, because I think Collins is actually better at the 5. But is that what you reckon? Or I just don't know. Like they don't have a small forward for me. That's their problem. Like who do they start at the small forward? That is my biggest issue with Atlanta right now. Do you guys have any ideas for me?
They definitely need one of their young guys to come around quick. They need either DeAndre Hunter or maybe Huerta to push to a small forward position, or they need Cam Reddish to decide that he can defend and shoot threes. I think it's going to be a 3-man big rotation. Like I get it that their front court it seems a little bit crowded with big names, but actually Capella is really only a bit player. He doesn't shoot the ball. Collins is going to try to stretch the floor as a 4, and he's probably at his very best at the 5 spot. And I think Gallinari is the only guy. He's definitely a 4-man who plays kind of the perfect role for us. He shoots a lot of threes and can defend and is physical. So I think even though he might not necessarily play heaps and heaps of minutes, he'll be a guy that they will look to in all the clutch situations, I reckon, Gallinari.
I'm suspect on his defense, personally. I just don't know where they're finishing. Like, do they finish with Collins at the 5 or at the 4? Like, and that is where Gallo fits in. If they finish at the 5, well, then Gallo maybe finishes, in my opinion, at the 4.
Their closing lineup is trying to win the game with scoring, not with defense. Like they got Trae Young.
That's true. They're not
trying to lock teams up. They're not locking teams up.
I have Gallinari, but I think the fit is so confusing. If you're going to pay a guy $20 million a year for him to come off the bench, I think there would have been plenty of better options. The fact that they ended up with Bogdan as well kind of seems as though now they sort of have one too many guys. There's an aspect that if you start Gallo at the 3 and keep Collins at the 4 and Capella at the 5, because for whatever reason, Collins is the, Atlanta poster boy and everyone sort of loves him there outside of Trae, that leaves things as there's obviously no defense, and it takes away from Gallo's best ability, as we sort of said, for him to play at the 4, stretch the floor. He was massive for OKC. That was where he excelled. There was obviously Miami trying to snag him at the trade deadline just due to how impactful he was. Now, I know Miami ended up with, Jay Crowder in the end, but they were trying for that stretch 4 position to fill a need. Gallinari was there. And so if you look at where the sort of Hawks are situated now, my ideal lineup is kind of Trae, Bogdan at the 2, and you're going to have to either start Hunter at the 3, or if you start a guy like Chris Dunn for defensive purposes, you move Bogdan to the 3 and put Dunn in the backcourt with Trae Young, and then Gallo at the 4 and Capella at the 5.
Actually, I actually think that works kind of well.
He said it. So you're that low on John Collins?
I think Gallo's much more effective next to Capella as opposed to John Collins.
You said this before as well, Darcy. I think I'm high on John Collins. I think there's a reason people speak about him, because a lot of people literally, I don't think, watch Atlanta basketball. John Collins is a gun. Like he's a modern 5. Like he can switch on balls, he can block shots, and he can shoot threes. Like, am I missing something here? As if he wouldn't start at the 4. Like, wherever Gallo fits, he fits. John Collins, John Collins could average like 20-10 steal block, like in this league. Like, I honestly think that's his like ceiling.
At what position?
Older. Like, I think starting at the 4, finishing at the 5. Like, I really think that's perfect in today's NBA. Like, I wouldn't finish with Capella because he doesn't give you enough spacing. But if you don't start a guy like Capella, then you don't get anything out of him. So I think you start him kind of like what the Warriors did with Bogut, I guess. You start him, and then you finish the game with Draymond, who would be Collins, at the 5.
Yeah.
That's what I think their best lineup is.
I think that makes sense. I think Gallinari, even coming off as a 6-man, could play a lot of the game, and as you said, would probably close the game. And I think I actually think that Chris Dunn actually makes a lot of sense in their lineup just to fill defense. But at the same time, like, you're an offensive team. You're not just because you put one defender out in the court doesn't necessarily mean that you guys are going to be able to guard anyone. Like Chris Dunn, he can't shoot, so it doesn't really fit sitting next to Trae Young. If on offense, what's Chris Dunn going to do? Nothing.
Well, like also putting Chris Dunn, in my opinion, is like a strength to cover a weakness. Like your strength could be your backcourt if you have Trae and Bogdan. Like forget about the defense or whatever. It's not going to be that good a defense, but like that's one of the better backcourts in the East. Nearly, like the East is not amazing. Like if you start Trae Young and Chris Dunn, it's just not as good in my opinion. Like it gives you a bit more defense, but then you're gonna have to start Bogdan at the 3, which is not, unless you don't want to start Bogdan. And then I think the biggest loser in the whole I really like Huerta. He's like squeezed out now. Where's Huerta gonna? Is Huerta not starting? Could you start Bogdan and Huerta with Trae? Could you do that?
Maybe.
I would probably do that. That's probably what I would do, to be honest. I'm just higher on those guys than Reddish and Hunter. But that's what I'd do. I don't think they're going to do that. That's what I'd do.
Well,
they started Hunter in the preseason, so...
Yeah. You go, Darcy.
Yeah.
He might get the first go at it.
I don't know. What do you guys think about Hunter? He's the most realistic, like, 3-and-D guy because he's bigger, but... You guys like him? You guys like Hunter?
I do personally. I like Hunter as a guy that, look, he's just body shape and his size. He's built to just come in and take the best wing on the other team. I know he's young. It's only his second year. I want to see a little bit more from him this season in terms of catch and shoot.
Well, can he shoot the 3? That's what it comes down to.
Well, maybe he's just D at the moment and he's not actually got the 3 part of his game.
In college, he could.
I didn't think he was great last year, and it was kind of confusing because they were a fantasy team last year and it was all built around Trae bouncing the ball 50 times and then deciding that a pull-up 3 from 35 feet was the best option. So it's hard to develop in a system like that. So I think we may be able to see the best of Hunter this year in a system that's built a little bit more around sharing the ball. I know still Trae Young's going to be the guy, but it can't be the same as last season based on the moves they've made in the offseason. So I think Hunter will get the first crack at the 3, but it's just a matter of how he can impact right off the bat, because if Atlanta get off to a bad start in, say we're halfway through January and they've pulled together 4 or 5 wins and they've lost 10 games, I don't know what we'll sort of think about them and their whole situation.
I think you're right in originally saying that, like, they have one too many guys now, like, because, like, I am high on, like, Huerta, quite, like, not stupidly high, but I think he's good. And like, I think Reddish is quite good. Like, Reddish could get minutes, but like, he's just not going to get minutes now, like, with the amount of guys they have. And then like Dunn as well and Rondo. Like what's going on? Like, is Trae Young even going to be in their best finishing lineup? Like, I don't know.
He's got to be. I think it's a ride or die.
They won't make the playoffs with him. Like, he can't defend me. Like, he can't.
I know, but it's a ride or die. I think, but with their position of Trae Young, they can't bench him after the Doncic trade. They can't then take him out to have a closing.
Could you literally just like have him scoring 25 a game and then let Rondo finish the last 5 minutes? Like, would that be possible?
No.
They're not going to make the playoffs if they ride Trae Young. I tell you what, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs if they ride Trae Young.
How do you feel, Darcy?
They just can't defend.
I think they're right there. I think not a lot needs to go right for them to sneak into the playoffs. Like, with Orlando made it last year. Like, what went right for them? They were just all right, and they walked into the playoffs. I think...
They had double as many wins as Atlanta.
Yeah. But Atlanta were not really trying last year. You cannot say that they were actually trying to win the way that they were playing. And I think you're right, Chris, to make a good point. They will have to play some serious ball to get guys like Bogdan involved and to actually get Gallinari shots. Like, you can't just play pick and roll with Trae Young the entire game with that.
Yeah.
They'll have to change the way they play a bit. And I think that their style will be probably pretty close to 9th best in the East. I think that's probably where I've got them.
Yeah, well, we'll take it over now to the season prediction. So, Darcy, do you want to keep it rolling? If you have 9th in the East, do you think they win the playing game and get into the playoffs? How do you feel?
I I don't think they do. I don't think they're good enough to beat a team like Washington. I think they'll play a similar style, a fun style. I think if they get into a series where that's why I love the playing game. Anything could happen in that quickly, like one big game,
So
Trae
true.
Young, and then all of a sudden you're in the playoffs. Fuck. And it's good for the bottom of the East, definitely. I think I actually think a team that could pop down and might be on the edge of the playoffs is Indiana. I think there's a potential for everything to kind of spiral out of control in Indiana, I think. But I still think they'll get over the hump against Atlanta in a play-on. And I reckon Orlando will pop out for sure. With no Jonathan Isaac, they're out of the playoffs for me.
Pat, how do you feel about Atlanta?
It's I'm in a similar position to Darcy. Like basically, like most people, I think basically understand there's probably like 6 locks in the East. We don't have to go through them all. But if the 7th is Indiana, I think Indiana's a lock. I'm much more bullish on Indiana than Darcy. Like Indiana's good for me. They're a lot better than Atlanta, Washington, or Orlando. Those are the 3 teams on the edge.
Yeah.
I think Atlanta's the worst out of the 3 of them, to be honest. Like it's interesting to me that people think the addition of Bogdan and Gallinari doubles your win. Like they have to double their wins basically from last year to get in. They barely won a game. Like it's a lot.
Well,
like,
they had no Capella.
No
Capella.
They had him
no
for
Capella
a
last
bit,
year.
and like
Collins
didn't play a
missed
game.
time. They didn't really. Yeah.
Collins, he's good, and like Capella, but like who are we comparing him to? Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook. Like Russell Westbrook to me, like as much as you want to say about him, I don't see him missing the playoffs in the East. And Bradley Beal to me is like one of the best players in the East. Both those players alone like carry them to the playoffs for me. Because actually, I think Westbrook will go all right with Scott Brooks there. Like they've done it before. Like I just don't see them missing the playoffs. And Orlando aren't that much worse. Like yeah, they lost Isaac, but like it actually makes it easier for Aaron Gordon. And like I don't know, Fultz was all right.
They lost Augustine.
Fournier. Yeah, but like Vooch would be the best player at Atlanta, like by far, in my opinion. Like,
well, that's why
it's tough
I think
for me to say.
Gallinari is their biggest signing because Gallinari is a buller, and in the Eastern Conference, he actually is one of the better guys. He's one of the better guys.
So is Bogdan. Bogdan's suddenly one of the better guards in the conference almost. Like the East is a lot weaker than the West, in my opinion. So they could sneak in, and like you said, in a playoff game, who knows? But tough for me to put them ahead of Brad Beal and Westbrook. Man, like it's almost like put some respect on those guys' name, in my opinion. Like Trae Young hasn't done anything. These are meaningless stats, man. Like in my opinion, I got to see some wins before I give him any type of playoff consideration.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That everything you said is pretty accurate. I do believe Atlanta will be there somewhere between. God, if they can manage to get an 8 seed, that'll be impressive. But I think they'll be more likely in that 9 to 10 range. And
is that a failure?
If they don't get into the playoffs, massive failure. If they all they do is play in and get knocked out, massive failure. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, like surely, like no one's expectations is them over. Like who are the locks? Like they're not better than Philly. They're not better than like. I don't. Like, are they? Do people really think they're going to be better than Indiana? Like, are people thinking that? I certainly don't. Do you guys think they'll like Darcy? You think Indiana will drop off a bit? Where do you rate Indiana, Christian?
I do think Indiana will have a slight down year. I think it's pretty concerning that Oladipo hasn't even looked 10% of himself. He certainly wasn't the guy in the bubble. The few games he played, it seemed as though he just came to collect his paycheck. I know that he opted out and then suddenly he came back in. I know it's preseason, but a few of the games he has not looked good, and they were against Cleveland. It just no flashes of the former guy himself. I mean, there's a few possessions where Cleveland's, I think he was the number 5 pick, Okoro, he was locking him up. It was like Oladipo tried a few things and put up a contested shot, and it was just kind of like, this looks like a role player. I can't believe this is Victor Oladipo, who before his injury was a stud.
How did Jeremy Lamb look? I
don't remember seeing Jeremy Lamb. I don't actually know if he did play.
Well, my thing is, even if you took Oladipo off their roster, like I still think they're a better team than Atlanta. Like TJ Warren would almost be Atlanta's best player. Like TJ Warren's a stud, and he's like what they got Sabonis and Brogdon, who are like better than him in my opinion. Like they got guys, man. They got like
Collins and Capella or Turner and Sabonis.
well, that's a tough one
Throw
because the Sabonis Turner fit is bizarre, but in a vacuum, probably Sabonis Turner. The fit's a bit weird.
They picked up Gallinari though as well for that front court.
That's true. You're high on Gallo. See, TJ Warren's a better Gallo in my opinion. I love TJ Warren. He's a walking bucket, man.
TJ's got plantar fasciitis, however you say that. So he's dealing with some foot injury himself. So no one's really sure about.
Is that supposed to be that long term? If that's long term with Oladipo, maybe then you could be right.
With TJ, the only thing he can do is rest. That's with that plantar fasciitis thing. There's no real remedy or cure. The more you're on your feet. Is there a
timetable on the return for that?
No, they can't because it's such a rare injury.
Right, I'll tell you what, man. Like I don't really want to go too deep into it, but like Chicago's roster isn't worse than Atlanta's. Like it's just not. Zach LaVine's a baller. So is Markin and so is Wendell. Like they could be better than Atlanta. Right?
Well, now they have a real coach.
That's the only thing stopping them before.
Yeah. Now Chicago have a real coach. Yeah, I agree. They'll be better, but I don't have the balls to say they'll be in the race there for that play-in. And if they are, well, I'm wrong. But I don't know if it's just buying into. It's like I don't know if it's buying into the LaMelo Ball hype too much, but I kind of think there's more chance Charlotte will be there in a play-in game than Chicago. I don't know if that's a crazy thing to you guys, but I just think that's the case.
I think Gordon Hayward's a really strong player, and he brings a good cultural aspect. He plays the right way.
Now that Chicago have got Billy Donovan, like they've got a proper coach, and like to me, LaVine, like he just needs to be unleashed, man. Like I feel like these fans essentially like have put Trae Young on this pedestal of this 30-10 guy that can actually win you games, but like LaVine's just as much as a walking highlight, and like he has more potential on the defensive end. Like LaVine, like he's just as likely to carry a team to the playoffs as Trae Young at this point. Like I honestly, like I really need to see something from Trae Young before I don him even over like Chicago. That's where I see it on Atlanta, I guess.
Very, very good discussions nonetheless. Anyway, I'm sure we could go on for ages about it, but is there a player outside of Trae Young that you guys are, well, Darcy, you've obviously rambled on about the Italian man.
Danilo.
So he's obviously your guy outside of Trae that you've got the highest hopes for this season?
Yeah, for sure. I think Capella's got to have a big year as well. I think people have forgotten about him, and people, didn't realize how integral he was to potentially a championship team in Houston. In the right system with a point guard who can absolutely throw the ball to him. Like I expect Capella to have a huge season. If they're going to be a consistent contender, it's going to be him having a massive role.
Yeah, I'm on board. I've actually got, before we go to you, Pat, I've got Capella on my list. So he's still pretty young. He's only 26, so he's hitting that sweet spot, and he's obviously very productive when he was on the court with Houston. If you go back and look outside of John Collins, who Atlanta had at the big spot last year, I mean, we can throw out some pretty awful names with Alex Len and Dwayne Dedmon. So Capella's an immediate upgrade, obviously, over those two guys. As Dust sort of outlined, he's a great rim runner. He's agile. He's obviously that lob threat, and he always seems to give good effort. I don't ever seem to think, and it's probably due to being forced into that by the D'Antoni system of playing Capella a ton of minutes. So he kind of had no choice but to get in really good physical shape and be prepared to play, early to high 30s on a regular basis, playing all those back-to-backs, be that real rim protector for those Houston teams. So similar to you, Das, I'm pretty high on Capella this year. How do you feel about the Atlanta, let's say, guys outside of Trae Young, Pat? Who stands out to you?
I think it's a good point mentioning Clint. I mean, I've rambled on about Collins. I think he's the key. I think he's the key for them. Like I could see him, like I said, kind of before alluding to that, like starting at the 4 and finishing at the 5 guy, like Draymond kind of paved the way for doing that. But I think he can really be that guy. Like he can block shots, he can move his feet, he can shoot the 3. Like he's got moves. Like he's young. Like he's athletic as anything. Like Why not? But like in saying that, I think Clint has to be that. Like Collins can't do it by himself. He's not big enough or good enough to do that. So I think Clint really has to be that rim protector, lock it down, start on like the Jokic's, the ADs, the big guys, whoever it is, even like Embiid, whoever it is, Sabonis. He has to start on them because Collins can't do that for a full game. Capella, but in today's NBA, how many fives like Capella finish the game?
Yeah, not
A
many.
lot of times,
Yeah.
like he's going to need to step up massively next to Trey defensively, and like he's. It seems like he'll be the starter, and he hasn't really ever had that consistent starter tag at Sacramento for whatever reason. But playing next to a playmaker like Trae Young, who creates that much space, and he's going to have to ask to be two-way, like it could go up or down for Bogdan this year. And I really like him, so I think he's going to have a big year. They got all the pieces. They really do. Like, hopefully they just play some defense and they'll win games. But
I
I'm
think
not convinced.
maybe they have too many pieces, like we said, but they have a lot of guys who might pop. A lot of guys who are in, like you said, that sweet spot in their career or in a situation where, bang, you could grab that starting spot and run with it. They do have a few guys who could pop. I think that gives them a great chance at the bottom of the Mid-East conference.
It's like you can definitely talk your way into the like thinking they're going to be a playoff team, but then you actually look at their games and wins last year, and you're like, oh yeah, they probably actually won't be. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, well, just to sort of extend off of Darcy's point there. Yes, and it's the same thing that I feel. Yes, they have too many guys, but when you have too many guys, it also comes into you've got options. So if they're not liking what they're seeing with a couple of guys, maybe you just throw out Rondo and Dunn and just see if they can create a bit more and be able to, potentially just get some stops on defense, and hopefully it leads to a spark on offense and get out and run, because they're most likely going to be a team that needs to win, the 130, 120 shootouts. But Lloyd, he was the assistant at Philly, and I know his main thing was defense when he was with us and Brett. So I know he's had to change his stance a little bit, obviously having the team he's got, and you sort of need to build a game plan around the guys you have. Look, Atlanta will be fascinating. I think I have a good idea of how they'll go, but who's to say us three aren't sitting here in 4 months' time and we're like, holy crap, how did we miss X player doing this? How didn't we see X player dropping off? I can't believe Atlanta are doing this, or they're struggling, anything can happen. Who's to say Trae Young doesn't get corona 2 weeks in and he misses and he can't come back, and there's a lot
and they're
here
better for it. Who knows?
Yeah, and they'll be better for it.
Give Rondo the keys, and maybe they win games suddenly. Who knows?
Rondo and John Collins
Nah.
pick and roll for 40 minutes.
Oh, no. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah,
See.
Fascinating season. No, that was really good to cover off on both Portland and Atlanta. So we'll probably leave it there. But before we go, outside of those two teams, I don't know if you guys have been tuning into a ton of preseason, but even just potentially looking at numbers or looking at results, is there anything that stands out to either of you? Do you have a takeaway from one team? If we start with you, Pat.
I don't know about the over-under reaction. I mean, I did see Philly play Boston a bit, and Philly looked pretty nice. I did like what I was seeing with Philly. Also, Golden State, I mean, that was always going to be intriguing, but I'm pretty bullish on those two teams. I think Philly, the additions they made, and watching Simmons kind of appreciate having some shooters and defenders around him, and Embiid looked in pretty good nick. I think Doc has enough know-how to get that going. And then G-State, I just miss watching Steph, so I was just loving that. And you forget how athletic Oubre is, man. That guy can jump out of the gym. I think he's a pretty big addition. So, and I always rate Steve Kerr. Didn't get to see Draymond, but those two teams I'm bullish on. One in each conference. There you go, Philly and Golden State. What about you?
Perfect. Das? Do you want to take one from the East, one from the West? Don't say Dallas from the West.
Yeah, mate. Don't get me started. You don't need to hear my take on Dallas. You know that I think that we can be top 2 in the West. I think we're that good.
Yeah.
And even in the preseason, you saw some of our depth. But I think just to touch on the Warriors, I thought that they looked like they were missing something big time in the shooting aspect next to Curry. They had a lot of guys who could make a three. But I don't think they have a genuine shooting guard on their whole roster. I think that's a big problem. And, it's fair enough. You're just a guy who's an absolute Iron Man at the 2 spot. But they could really struggle. I don't really, at the moment, I don't really necessarily even think that they will contend for the playoffs at this stage unless we can see something remarkable out of Draymond and Steph. And over to the east side, from what I've liked in the preseason, I liked Philly as well. And the little snippet I saw of Toronto, it looked like Toronto Raptors basketball. They're a team with a lot of continuity, with a good coach. I love the addition of Aaron Baines. I think he's going to be really solid for them.
Baines, such a good get.
Anunoby can make a jump. I like Norman Powell. I think Van Vliet is coming into his own as like a star in the league. So they've got an elite backcourt. And they got Siakam, who's probably got a fire in his belly to have another big year. So seeing them in the preseason, maybe a little bit overreaction, but I think they're genuine contenders for the East still.
Should probably mention KD looked pretty scintillating as well. I did like that. I did see that. That was pretty good.
Yeah, in the half that him and Kyrie played, they looked pretty absurd. My only worry for Brooklyn is just defensively. They seem to, if they're going to have a starting lineup of Kyrie, LeVert, Joe Harris, KD, and DeAndre Jordan, I don't know. It feels like if we were to quickly go over them, they seem to be a trade away in terms of just getting another guy in there that's probably an ideal 3-and-D to fit in there, because it doesn't feel like they have enough defense. But again, that's looking at one game against the Washington Wizards. So yeah, it's hard to sort of have too many takeaways from that sort of crew, other than Denny Avdija looking pretty saucy himself, actually. So see if he can be any sort of contributor to that Wizards wing lineup. But for me, is there anything that really stood out? I would have loved to see Wiseman in the preseason games, just to see if he's anything. We obviously didn't get to see much tape of him. I think he played 3 or 4 games for Memphis before he got ruled ineligible. So it's been a really extended break between, seeing him last play. But yeah, him and Draymond. I actually don't know when the Atlanta sign and trade went down with Bogdan in comparison to when the Clay injury happened with Golden State, because I wonder if Golden State could have been a player in trying to get Bogdan. That would have been pretty nice next to Steph. Mm-hmm. But again, I don't know when the Clay news happened. I feel like it was draft night that it came out that Clay did it in the scrimmage.
Well, there was the Milwaukee thing with Bogdan as well. So
that's right.
Yeah.
So I don't know the timing in there, because I'm sure the Golden State management are so on top of it that they would have pursued every possible, deal to try and better help Steph and Draymond. So
I'm pretty sure Ryan Brokoff's available now.
Yeah, get him.
After his short free stint.
Come on, give that man a contract. He can shoot. He could actually work at Golden State. Like that's not a bullshit quote. Like I actually think he would be good at Golden State. Go get him, Golden State.
Yeah, legitimate sniper for sure. So I think we'll wrap things up there. So we'll end it with Darcy thinks the Mavs will go undefeated and win the championship, and Pat thinks Ryan Brokoff will be in the running for MVP.
No, Dame for MVP or Brokoff, one or the other.
Yeah, if it's not Dame, it's Brokoff. Yeah,
most improved.
100%.
Perfect. All right, well, that wraps things up. So, look, I think Darcy and I are going to come back with a bit of betting before the season kicks off. So, give out some over-unders for season wins. We'll look at championship odds, odds to make the playoffs. We'll look at then the awards, be it MVP, most improved rookie, 6-man, defensive player. We'll cover it all.
Sure.
So that'll come probably Monday, Tuesday next week, just before things kick off with, I think it's Golden State, Brooklyn, and then it's the Battle of LA is the opening day game. So plenty to look forward to, plenty to be intrigued about. But yeah, thanks very much for your time. Darcy, will speak to you soon. Pat, appreciate you doing this.
All good, mate. Had a lot of fun. I knew a lot of Darcy's takes, to be honest. I've heard it all before, but it's good to hear you talk some stuff.
Perfect. Okay, Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, Chris.